guidelines to help ensure this meeting will proceed smoothly. Regrettably, this method of holding a meeting limits our ability to hear public comment from residents. In lieu of public comment, I encourage members of the public to email council members directly. Our email addresses can be found on the council's website under the About Us section. Everyone other than the person speaking should put their microphone on mute. Please direct all questions and requests to speak through me. When you want to make a comment, ask a question, or participate in discussion, please wave your hand so I can see you on the screen. I will call on members in the order that I see their hand. Members who are using a phone connection only should speak up when I call for any other discussion on any item. Because conversations among several people by electronic means can be cumbersome, we should limit our discussions to business items and issues directly related to the business items. As we've been doing, I ask that members again state their names when they're speaking to ensure members of the public can follow our discussions with ease. And please refrain from speaking over other speakers. When you make a motion or a second motion, also please state your name so a motion has been made and seconded, and the recording secretary can record this information for the minutes. Because we are conducting the meeting electronically, all votes will be taken by roll call. When we do so, Jenna will call the roll in alphabetical order. The other council members and the public who may be monitoring the meeting must be able to hear your vote. When your name is called for each vote, please clearly state aye or nay for or abstain so I can determine whether a majority voted in favor of the motion. During the course of this meeting, if you leave the location from which you are participating, please inform me of your absence so I can ensure a quorum continues to exist throughout the meeting. Are there any questions before I proceed? All right, if not, then Jenna, if you'd like to call the roll.
Atlas Ingebretson. Chambliss.
Here.
Cummings.
Here.
Ferguson.
Here.
Fredson. Gonzalez.
Here.
Thank you. Sterner.
Here.
And Zarin.
Present.
The roll has been called.
Thank you, Jenna. With that, I call to order the meeting for the Metro Council Transportation Committee for April 27, 2020. Our first order of business is approval of the agenda. Did anyone have any changes or additions to the agenda? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Cummings moves.
Moved by Cummings. Is there a second?
Chambliss second.
Seconded by Chambliss. Any other discussion? Jenna, would you please call the roll?
Atlas Ingebretson. Chambliss.
Here.
Chambliss. Thank you. Cummings.
Aye, sorry.
Ferguson.
Aye.
Fredson. Gonzalez.
Yeah.
Sterner.
Aye.
Zarin. Zarin.
Aye.
And Barber.
Aye. And with that, the agenda is approved. Next, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes, and it's the minutes from the April 13th, 2020 meeting. Did anyone have any changes or additions to the minutes? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So move.
Moved by Gonzalez. Is there a second?
Sterner.
Seconded by Sterner. Any other discussion? Okay, Jenna, would you call the roll, please?
Atlas Ingebretson. Chambliss.
Aye.
Cummings.
Aye.
Ferguson.
Aye.
Fredson. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Sterner.
Aye.
Zarin.
Aye.
And Barber.
Aye. That the minutes are approved. We seem to be getting better and better at this, by the way. I think we're getting pretty good. We're now on to our tabulation report. So we have Mr. Dugan here. He's going to do a report covering both March and April. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Chair. Can everyone okay?
So there's an echo.
Oh.
Do you have the phone and the computer on?
I just have, just have. I do not have any other microphone on except for on my laptop.
All right, test out your mic one more time, Peter.
How about now?
That sounded better. How about this? How about if you dial, leave the call and dial back in, because sometimes that cleans up the connection, and we'll just move to the MTS and Metro Transit reports and come back to the tab report, if everyone's okay with that. Okay. All right, very good. Then we'll go to Director Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, just a couple updates on operations wise. We continue to have pretty stable ridership on Metro Mobility and Transit Link, with our ridership still down about 70%. We did notice last week that our Metro Mobility ridership was higher than it had been for a few weeks, so we're continuing to monitor that. But we do believe that customers are limiting their trips as much as they can to just essential trips, which is great. 2 weeks ago, we started our healthcare worker essential transit service using the Metro Mobility fleet. And Friday, that service has been growing day over day very well. On Friday, we had our highest ridership of about 300 rides provided for those that work at healthcare facilities. We also had food delivery of between 150 and 250 trips. From most of that, again, is from food shelves, but there's still growing demand in that area. We've been getting some requests to expand our essential worker service to more jobs, including home healthcare workers, and we're continuing to evaluate that. We're trying to see if there's changes with the stay-at-home order next week, particularly watching to see if there's any changes for adult daycare providers if they reopen and accept ridership again, and that would have a big limit on our capacity, but we may expand our essential core service trips to other jobs this week. We're continuing to monitor that. Operations-wise, last week we delivered masks to all our drivers on the contracted services fleet. The similar masks that were provided from the same company for Metro Transit. And so those masks should be worn by all our drivers on the fleet and anybody from those services that working closely, dispatchers, mechanics, and others, which is great. Our workforce continues to be stable. Most of our drivers continue to be able to report to work. We have 14 drivers that are in self-quarantine, and we've had 4 confirmed COVID diagnosis of drivers, but in all cases, we've determined that they were low risk to passengers because of when they last worked. In terms of transportation data, as we've had presented here and continued to track and watch changes in traffic on the system, I think in the metro area, it continues to be stable, that roughly we're at 45 to 50% of normal traffic levels. We're starting to see a greater growth in travel outside of the metro area. And we'll be watching closely as the stay-at-home, or as some of the jobs were able to return today. So we'll continue to monitor that on a day-to-day basis so that the governor and staff can use that data to see how their orders are working for social distancing. And with that, that concludes my report. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Director Johnson. Any questions? Anyone have any questions? Okay. All right, thank you very much. On to General Manager Questra.
Madam Chair, I have quite a few things to cover here. I'll try to get through it as quickly as I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. COVID-19 continues to hit home. We're closely monitoring, responding to the COVID cases at Metro Transit. We've had 5 confirmed cases so far, 4 operators and 1 police officer. We're finding that each situation is different, but generally we are working closely with the managers and with the Human Resources Department. We're identifying others who've been in close contact with the person. We're identifying spaces that need immediate enhanced cleaning, and we're communicating to staff as deemed appropriate per the council policies and MDH guidance. I will say that some of our upfront work in creating social distancing for operators, for example, has worked to our advantage in this. The back of the bus boarding and the arm that separates the operator from the other riders means that they're further than 6 foot from the other riders, and certainly are not in a situation where they're within 6 feet for more than 10 minutes. And so that helps with some of the other notifications that has to occur. On the police side, they have 3 distinct shifts, and they have single occupancy squad cars. So that also helped in that regard. So some of this upfront work has done a lot, although we still do a lot of due diligence and put a lot of effort into identifying how each person who has a positive test has had contact with others during that 72-hour period that we look behind towards. We're also continuing to evaluate what we can do to reduce risks. I'll say every time that every decision we've made is prioritized against the health of our riders and our employees and the general public. We continue to urge customers to use transit only as essential travel. And as a result, we're seeing a very low ridership at this time. The week of April 20th through April 26th, bus was down 69%, Blue Line was down 82%, Green Line was down 76%, North Star was down 98%, and we had an overall systems ridership that was down 72%. We continue to encourage social distancing for people who must ride, and we've created occupancy limits for buses that went into effect a week and a half ago, where we have 10 riders on a 40-foot bus, an occupancy limit of 15 riders on a 60-foot articulated bus. When possible, we're deploying articulated buses to routes with the highest ridership, and we're also adding trips to routes with the highest ridership. We continue rear door boarding to limit interaction with operators, and again, there's a 6 foot, more than a 6 foot distance, probably an 8 foot distance between the operators and the riders of the bus. We're now cleaning buses daily, and we're also cleaning LRV daily, and there's different protocols and deep cleaning done periodically, but we're providing a cleaning and generally a fogging on a daily basis of all our rolling stock. As has been shared to you with respect to masks, we've partnered with ATU to distribute masks to operators. We've now ordered many thousands more masks that we can distribute, surgical style masks that can be used by our staff and that will be available to us for distribution. And we're strongly encouraging riders to cover their nose and mouth. We put signs in we're putting signs in our rolling stock to direct our riders to cover their nose and mouth. We are falling short of saying you are required to, but our messaging is everything short of that, saying that they're required. We've talked about requirements for mask use. I think it's a legitimate discussion to have. One of the issues is, of course, is how you would enforce that. So far we've taken the tactic of encouraging it strongly and saying, please use, and putting signs up, and we are starting to see more mask use by our riders.
Hey, Les, I saw that Reva had a quick question, if you wouldn't mind pausing for a sec. Reva, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So I have a couple questions about the encouraging the social distance. The standard being 8 foot distance between the riders. And you already talked about, we already have the 6 foot distance between the bus driver. How do we know that's being maintained, and what are we doing if it's not maintained?
That's That's a great question. First of all, we have about an 8-foot distance between the riders and the bus. I misspoke earlier, and we're encouraging 6-foot distancing on the buses between riders. What we're doing is essentially bus operators have a sign up that says something refers to using the next bus, and they will pass stops if they have more than 10 people on a 40-foot bus and more than 15 people on a 60-foot articulated bus. It's really up to the riders to social distance once they're on the bus. We're trying to find that balance, and there's limits to enforcement of these things. We're trying to find that balance of trying to set the standards, set the rules, but not get the operators engaged in sort of direct enforcement work, because that creates conflict between the riders and the operators that we don't want to encourage. So again, we're trying to inform the public. We're trying to create situations where the public can conform to social distancing requirements. Beyond that, our enforcement has some limitations to it.
Okay, thank you. One more question.
Go ahead.
Sure. Okay, thank you. So in terms of encouraging riders to cover their nose and face or wear a mask, one of the things that I have noticed in going out for my essential travel is a potential disparity in who is wearing masks and who isn't wearing masks. And I'm wondering if some people may be having difficulty getting their hands on a mask, and whether or not, if we do change to the point where they are going to be required to wear a mask, would we be able to distribute them for free or at low cost? And I'm talking for transportation, and also as we are a partner with this COVID response team, if that can also be something that is taken to the task force.
Madam Chair and Council Member, I think that the masks that we've ordered thousands of masks, but they're the surgical style masks that don't last very long, of course, and have limits to them. So I don't know that those would be good for handing out to the general public. One of the concerns that we have, and I think I'm raising concerns we have, not to say that it's a bad idea to hand out masks to the public, because I think you're right. There could be some disparities on who has masks and who does not have masks. One of the concerns we have in handing them out is that people need to know how to handle masks when they receive them. There needs to be instructions with them. They need to understand how to apply the mask, because if you're touching your face, there's all sorts of those kinds of issues. When we've been in contact with other transit providers who have done this, and they've had those kind of problems, and we're staying in contact with them to see what kind of problems they've run into and how they've addressed those. But that conversation is still ongoing at an operations level here, and we've been raising it with the regional administrator and the council as well. And there's pros and cons to it. That's all I'm saying. We're trying to figure out if that's a plausible thing to do, and if it's something that we can do responsibly.
Okay, thank you.
All right, very good. Councilmember Zarin.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Wes or Mr. Koistra, I would like to ask a question around has all the issues been settled around taking breaks and around bathroom breaks for operators? Are all those issues resolved?
Madam Chair and Councilmember Zarin, I'm not going to say that they're all solved, because I haven't had that stated to me as yes, they're all solved. But I will say that they were being raised early because of the lack of the restroom facilities as businesses closed, that were made available to our operators, and we have put porta potties at a number of sites to address that. And I'll just say this: I meet daily with the operations staff every morning, and I haven't heard it come up. I will ask that at the next meeting.
All right, thank you, Wes. Well, you can go ahead with the rest of your report. Thank you.
All right, I think I ended with the occupancy limits on the bus. We continue to do the rear board rear door boarding to limit interaction with operators. And then I mentioned the masks, so I'll move on to, I'm catching up with myself here, I apologize. I was moving into supporting operators during this time. I wanted to mention that last Tuesday, the lights at Target Field Station went blue to show support for Metro Transit on-site essential staff. It was pretty cool. In addition, the large video screen that sets at the transit station above the Target Field showed the transit in this together logo. That was pretty neat too. And I think that there's pictures of that in the Insights that was just the Insights newsletter that was distributed last Friday. I want to also invite council members. We've been soliciting this from the general public and from our other staff and so forth. And I want to certainly invite council members to, if they so choose, to share their thoughts and their thanks to those frontline staff, those essential on-site workers, by taking a video themselves, thanking them and giving them some words that you would like to share with them. And if you do this, if you record yourself, you can send those video messages to insights@metrotransit.org. I'll say it again, insights@metrotransit.org. We're inviting the public to do this. We're inviting other Metro Transit staff to do this, and we would certainly love the council members to do this as well. And then we show them, we show them on the monitors at each of the garages, and we're doing a few at a time. And then at the end, we're going to put them all together into a single presentation. And you know, it's really important to keep the morale up of our operators. And it's our operators, it's our police officers, it's our maintenance workers. It's our cleaning staff, and when I start naming them, I forget a category. So if anybody's listening and I've forgotten you, please forgive me. But at any rate, all those people that are on the front lines, at risk of exposure to the public, and whatever you can do to encourage them, we would appreciate. And this is one other thing that you can do. So, as you have time, consider that, please. Service impacts, we continuously are monitoring, discussing what the pandemic means for future service plannings. We're trying to balance essential travel needs with operator availability and the responsibility to provide security in our system. We had to further reduce light rail hours due to operator absences. We have nearly 40% of our light rail operators are absent due to the COVID-related issues. So our LRT is currently closed between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. We're starting to work on the June PIC. The June PIC goes into effect on June 13th. We're developing two scenarios, a 65% scenario and an 80% of regular service scenario. And these service scenarios allow us to stay focused on many of the core local routes where demand has remained the highest. And it demonstrates our ongoing commitment to the community members who need us the most. The service scenarios being developed allow us to stay focused on our core routes where the demand has stayed strong. And this approach gives us the flexibility to manage operator absences, increased ridership demand, as we anticipate the governor will gradually allow businesses to open over May, June, and beyond. We will decide what scenario to implement in the June PIC by mid-May. I'll say right now, it appears that it's most likely to choose the 65% scenario based upon what we know today. But again, we're going to put off that decision as far as we can prior to executing and making a final decision. As far as our financial situation, with ridership down approximately 75% statewide, and we're suspending on-board payment, we're assuming that fare revenues are suffering more than ridership itself. So if we're down nearly 75% in ridership, we're probably down more than that in terms of fare revenues. We'll have a better forecast after we close out April and see what's happened with the various employee passes and so forth. MVES is about 60% the February forecast for the first 3 weeks of April. Working with MnDOT, we had forecasted a decline in invest of 60% through June 30th. So that's about what we forecasted. And 25% for state fiscal year 2021, which runs from July 2020 to June 2021. And we'll be monitoring actual invest receipts constantly and reforecasting as we go. The good news is the CARES Act funding, our region received $226 million, our metro region. 12 million of that went to the suburban transit providers, went to the opt-out providers. The remaining 214 million will be used to cross-council services, and that's a real shot in the arm for us to buy some time to understand where our transit environment's heading and where it's going to go in the long term, and for us to do some long-term planning as we go forward. The CARE money can be used for both operating and capital. It's 100% federal reimbursed. The funds are available till expended, and we get them on a reimbursement basis. I actually have some items that are beyond COVID related as a little bit of fresh air, if you don't mind, Madam Chair.
Go right ahead.
With regard to the electric bus and charger update, we did renegotiate the terms of the warranty on March 24th, and all chargers now have a 5-year parts and labor warranty. The chargers previously had a 2-year warranty. Buses now have 8-year warranties on the propulsion and the energy storage systems. These major components had 5 and 6 years warranties respectively. The warranty period for chargers and buses start on March 2020 instead of the time of delivery. And the New Flyer Connect, which is the in-service operational data acquisition system, is 4 years rather than 2 years. So we really believe this is more representative of having sort of more of a research and development relationship with New Flyer, and we appreciate New Flyer coming to the table and working out these new warranties, and Siemens as well working out these new warranties with us. There's significant changes to the warranties, and I'm appreciative of that work and the work of our staff who are involved in the negotiation of these changes. In terms of functionality, we have the online chargers at BCTC, we have one charger available, one charger is not available. So we're continuing to have some issues. At Haywood, 7 of the 8 depot chargers are currently available. So they're working on the one that's not available. Mentioned that the electric buses are continuing to run in service on C-Line even when experiencing the Brooklyn Center Transit Center charger issues. When necessary, the buses charge only at Haywood and return when the charge is depleted. This is the same mode of operation we used for C-Line during the opening before the BCTC chargers became available. The warmer weather has improved their distance. They're going in the warmest weather we've had so far. They're going 90-mile blocks of work to be completed on a single charge. That's a pretty significant change. On colder days, the buses were swapped out en route after 70 miles. In general, the buses are performing well, although we continue to have some difficulties where 2 of 8 of our buses are still unavailable. Those are the issues being worked out. That's why we have the extended warranty, and we have a strong commitment of service from both New Flyer and from Siemens. In terms of rail maintenance, we're wrapping up about a week of partial closure on Blue Line from April 20 to 27. We closed parts of the line to do some rail work and offered replacement bus service during that time. Did this in collaboration with MnDOT, who was doing bridge painting over Highway 9, and we completed our rail line while they were dealing with their painting, and we tried to coordinate and do this at a time where there's less ridership and less disruption to people. Orange Line construction continues. A couple weeks ago, crews poured the new bridge deck for the transit station at I-35W and Lake Street. This new station will be served by Metro Transit Orange Line and I-35W express routes. The ramp from southbound I-35W to westbound I-94 is now closed to allow for construction of another Orange Line feature, the new transitway under I-494. If you have a chance to drive by, you can see the trench. The transitway will allow Orange Line buses to bypass traffic, improving travel times in the corridor. Green Line received the Green Line extension received another letter of no prejudice, which allows it to continue its work until we receive the full funding grant agreement, which we're hopeful for. In terms of future planning, my final item, as I wrote in the Insights column last Friday, we expect that transit will change forever in the aftermath of this pandemic, and service demand and service expectations will change for reasons we all are thinking about. And we're starting to talk about how we can not only respond to these changes, but be on the leading edge of transit service design in the new norm. And we know this will be a long journey. We're looking at it and optimistically. We will be engaging. We want to engage with you and our other stakeholders in this process. And, we're just trying to view this as an opportunity to build a better and stronger transit system. I didn't say bigger, but better and stronger. And I think that it's opportunities for partnerships we haven't had and opportunities to see a new role in transit in our region. We are just in the early stages of discussing about how to go about this work, but I want you to know that we are going to be deliberate about building a better system and not simply returning to the status quo. We're going to be excited about this work, and we feel optimistic about it, and we're appreciative that we have some financing, federal financing in place that allows us a little bit of time to get to think forward as we anticipate the changed environment that we're heading towards. Thank you for your patience. That was a long one. I could not hear you. Sorry.
Any questions from council members? So Councilmember Chambliss.
Yeah, thank you for that comprehensive report. That really gives us an idea of how operations are going in spite of all the difficulties we're having now, and also the LRT construction updates. What about our MnDOT updates? I know this is a little bit outside of that, but are those timelines still on track? And I know in Brooklyn Park we have a sewer project. Is that on track?
Madam Chair, I don't know that I'm not familiar with enough with those projects to give good information. I'm not sure if others here are.
Madam Chair, this is Nick.
Go for it.
I can speak for MnDOT. Again, this is Nick Thompson. At this point, MnDOT has not delayed any projects for the year, and they're continuing forward with their construction. We will have an update meeting with them at the end of this week. So at the next Transportation Committee, I can provide a fuller update on if they're making any changes to planned construction, at least this year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other additional questions? All right, Wes, I would just ask that you, that Insights, I think a number of council members outside of even this group would be interested in doing that. So it'd be great if you could get it out to all of the council members so they could participate.
Madam Chair, I will absolutely do that. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. All right, so now we're going to circle back to the tab liaison report to Mr. Deegan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Much better, thank you.
Okay, yes, and thank you, Greg, for helping me with the audio. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, the honorable committee members, General Manager Koistra, and of course, Director Thompson and Jenna. Excuse me, let me go off script just initially to congratulate General Manager Koistra. What a great job you're doing. I mean, that's really impressive. Wow. Okay, we're going to start off with the chair reports. If you would like, Jenna has available to her, and you may have already seen this, a MnDOT issued COVID-19 traffic impact, COVID-19 impact report to travel in Minnesota. It's quite extensive and it's quite illuminating. Again, Jenna has a link should you want it, and Madam Chair, you may already have it. In regard to the MPCA, our regular tab representative, Assistant Commissioner for Air Quality, McDonald, is billeted to the governor's office for the duration of COVID-19. So he's temporarily been replaced. And in MAC, unfortunately, some challenging news from the Metropolitan Airports Commission. Air traffic is down 95%, parking down 90%, only 20% of the concessions are open. And they forecast that by the end of the year, air traffic will return to the 80s, 90s level, and it will take at least a year to get back to pre-COVID. In regard to, at the last TAB meeting, the regional solicitation, the TAB added flexibility to the regional solicitation, and that is that the regional solicitation applications require certain elements, and one of the elements is turning movement count data, and they are, because it's pretty near impossible to get what it's called AADT, average annual daily traffic count. I'm sorry, Commissioner Zarin, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I just wanted, if I could ask to go back and tell me again about air travel. I missed that part. It's kind of startling, 95% travel down.
Yes, thank you, sir. That was what was reported to us by the Metropolitan Airports Commission representative. 95% decrease in traffic, 90% decrease in concessions with only 20% operating. And then air traffic by the end of the year forecasted to be back to that of the late 80s, early 1990s, and approximately a year to recover from the COVID to what was pre-COVID air traffic. The only good news coming out of that is that some of their construction projects are getting done quicker, the same as MnDOT. Thank you, sir, for that question. And excuse me, and in regard to the regional solicitation, again, there are three elements that the TAB has been requested by the applicants to change or to give flexibility. One is on the traffic turning count data, and because there's very little traffic on the road, the TAB is allowing flexibility in using traffic data of 3 years, the last 3 years, or going to one of our vendor agencies called Streetlight Insight and using their traffic counts. Streetlight Insight is a big data management company that handles real-time traffic analytics on an interactive basis, headquartered in San Francisco. Pretty impressive. Excuse me. And the second aspect of the regional solicitation that TAB has agreed to flexibility on is outreach meetings. Because if cities or counties, excuse me, applicants make a good faith effort, then they will consider that in the application. And lastly, the required letters of supports from partners will not have to be in until September 1st. That's because most of the partners are municipal or governmental organizations, and many of them are on furlough or remote staffing. And so it's made it a bit more difficult to get those. And that, I believe, let me just check one. And as you probably know, Deputy Director Benowitz provided an update on the TPP chapters update. And I will have any questions you have, and I will stay on, but I will turn the video off. Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. DeGan. Any questions for him about the TAB report?
Thank you.
Councilmember Chambliss. You're on mute still.
Thank you. I just have one kind of general question about our good faith efforts and regional solicitation requests and others in general. I'd like for us to maybe think about tracking and incentivizing those organizations that go beyond have the good faith effort in actually meeting some of the challenge goals. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there, and perhaps we can think about that as we get requests for monies.
So if I may, like part of the regional solicitation, how it was redone this year is exactly that, is the equity scores get improved both with the quality and the quantity of public engagement. So that was something that was built into it. It is our first run through with this new process that we put in place. So it will definitely need to be revisited, but I think the work group this year really did a lot of work to do just that, because we wanted it to be valuable input, not just input for the sake of input. So that's what we're headed to. And unfortunately, some of those efforts are sidetracked because of the situation we're in right now, and the timing of when the applications are due. So I don't know if we'll get to see the full benefit of it this cycle, but it's something we certainly are keeping in consideration. Did you have any other thoughts, Peter?
No, that's a very good answer, Madam Chair. Madam Vice Chair, that is a great question. And as Madam Chair Barber said, there's been a great deal of effort put into really make the public outreach and the equity portion of it count. And so instead of just dismissing it in total, saying, well, you really can't have any meetings now, their good faith efforts are going to be given consideration. Points is what I should say, so that will be a factor.
I get your question. Okay. All right.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good start. We can just continue to monitor and have continuous improvement as we do the assessment.
That would be great, Madam Vice Chair.
Yeah, and I think this step was a great improvement. But just like everything, we have to go back and look and see what worked and what didn't work. Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen.
Thanks, Chair. I think one thing we're hearing a lot about in our work is just the fatigue right now too. So I think another big piece is that their engagement is only one part of equity work. Because you do engagement does not mean the project is equitable. So I just want to encourage and remind us that even though it's not going to be able to do engagement the way we've been able to under other circumstances, the projects themselves and the way we rate them should be also based on the implementation of equitable efforts and planning.
Thank you, member. Deb, I'll respond, but I know you know this better than I do. The equity piece is solid and is static, meaning that's not changing. It's really outreach, trying to get to talk to people that is a little variable at this time. But the equity piece is is part of the process. But I really appreciate you bringing that up, as well as Madam Vice Chair. It's great. Much appreciated.
Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you. And I will just add that the times that we have now and the tools that we are using is taking us into some more innovative ways of communication that could even be more effective right now. So that was brought up in a news video that I saw this morning. Is there are new ways that we can engage and communicate online now, so that because more people are able to access these new tools.
Yes, you're right, Madam Vice Chair. And as I said, any suggestions that you can give us, particularly from being so close to your constituents, would be greatly appreciated. Very helpful.
Certainly, thank you.
All right, anything else from council members? All right, thank you, Peter, appreciate it. Next, we are on to our business items. Our first business item is business item 2020-135, which is 2020-2023 TIP amendment for MnDOT transit vehicle purchase for RISE. And we have Joe Barbeau here, I believe.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I forgot to unmute as I usually do. So this is a TIP amendment that went through TAB at its last meeting to purchase transit vehicles for RISE Incorporated. This is an annual fund called FTA Section 5310 that goes through MnDOT and is awarded by MnDOT on an annual basis. What normally happens is that the timing of these awards and when these awards are made does not coincide well with the development of the TIP. So in the off season, we typically get a handful of TIP amendments. one tip amendment to put forth a handful of these awards. In this particular case, we only have one that needed to come through this process, and so this is the step to put this into the tip to award FTA funds that are awarded through MnDOT to one of these providers. Like I said, this is an annual process that we usually get. So if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, that's all I have.
Any questions from council members? All right, if not, I would entertain a motion to approve business item 2020-135.
Atlas Ingebretson, so moved.
Moved, is there a second?
So moved. Gonzalez.
Second by Gonzalez. Any other discussion? Jenna, would you call the roll, please?
Atlas Ingebretson,
Aye.
Bayless, Imless,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Ferguson,
Aye.
Fredson, Gonzalez,
Aye.
Sterner,
Aye.
Zarin,
Aye.
Barber.
Aye. And that the motion carries. Thank you, Joe. Next, we are on to business item 2020-128. It's Southwest Light Rail Transit Appraisal Services Contract Amendment. We have Robin Kaufman.
Good afternoon, Chair Barber and committee members. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, if you can.
Excellent. So this is, my name is Robin Kaufman. I'm the Director of Administration, and I'm going to be presenting a business item to request an increase to 2 of our appraisal master contracts for Southwest LRT project. So just a little bit of background about these contracts. We awarded these back in 2017. We actually selected 3 appraisers and awarded master contracts to for $500,000 to each of those 3 appraisers. So the total contract value was $1.5 million, and that was part of a competitive procurement. And to date, we have issued work orders to all 3 of those contractors for updated appraisals, settlement negotiations, and testimony for the 87 parcels that we have in condemnation, some phase of the condemnation process for Southwest. The initial acquisitions for those temporary construction easements were for 3 years, and some of those included an option where we could have extended for 1 year. So basically, these temporary easements started in 2017 based on those initial appraisals that were done back in 2016 and 2017. And because of that, the 3 years, many of these temporary easements are expected to expire sometime between December 2020 and December of 2021. But as you know, we're going to be continuing civil construction until 2022. There were several factors. We did the appraisals back in 2016 and 2017, and at that time, since then, there's actually been a few scheduling changes that have resulted in the construction schedule changing, such as the initial civil construction contract was canceled, and then we reissued that civil contract, and then there was a little bit of a delay in awarding that first contract, that civil contract, because while we were waiting for the letter of no prejudice. So as a result, we basically will need to acquire new temporary construction easements to get us to the end of 2023, and this will allow us time in order to finish construction, and then also get through going through testing, and then often doing any punch list items that come up. So we're going to need to do this for about 100 and up to 128 parcels. We have 21 parcels that are expiring this year, and another 80 that are expiring next year. So we're going to be needing to do updated appraisals for those parcels in order to go through the acquisition process again. So as a result, we are 2 of the contractors have almost used up all of their funds. So Integra has only $73,000 left on their contract, and Patch and Mesner only has $49,000 left on their contract. So as a result, we are requesting an amendment to the contract to add $75,000 to Integra Realty for a new total not to exceed of $575,000. And then Patch and Mesner were proposing to add $325,000 to their contract for a total of $825,000. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, any Councilmember Cummings?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's interesting that 2 of the 3 are getting extensions. Might the 3rd contractor also need an extension, or is there a contract around other easements and so forth that will not require that?
Madam Chair and Councilmember, that's a good question. I should have mentioned that that 3rd contract does have $181,000 left on their contract, and another reason is that these 3 contractors did the initial appraisal, and we need to remain and stay with the appraisers, since there's some benefits to that in that they've already done the first appraisal, and so there's some benefits to having them do the second appraisal. They've already done a lot of the research. They're familiar with the parcel. They've already prepared a report, and so we will be allocating the parcels based on who did the initial appraisal, and that's why you see a little bit of a difference in the dollar amounts. Did that answer your question?
I'm still a little bit confused as to why 2 out of the 3 needed additional extensions, but the 3rd did not. I understand sticking with the 3 originals, but I'm not understanding why 2 out of the 3 needed extensions, because some of those easement contracts were going to run out, but in the 3rd one there wasn't any. Is it just because they still have quite a lot of funding left to work with?
That is correct, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Committee member, that is correct. The one that's left has fewer parcels and also has more money in their contract, where these other have more of the parcels and have already used up a good portion of their contract.
Okay, thank you. I get it.
Okay.
Thank you. Additional questions from council members? If not, then I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2020-128.
Chambliss makes a motion to approve.
Chambliss moves. Who was the second? I'm sorry.
Cummings.
Cummings second. Is there any other discussion? Jenna, can you call the roll, please?
Allison Bretson,
Aye.
Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Ferguson,
Aye.
Brenson, Gonzalez,
Aye.
Sterner,
Aye.
Zarin,
Aye.
Barber.
Aye. The motion carries. Thank you, Robin. We're next on to business item 2020-129, which is Hennepin Avenue Downtown Reconstruction Cooperative Construction Agreement. We have Paul Lamb, I believe. Is Paul on the
Deb.
line? Oh, there you are. Okay.
Oh, Deb, this is Greg. Paul
Yeah.
had sent me an email. Power at his house just went out.
Oh, no.
He's not able to log on. He was
Okay.
going to try to call in, but apparently he's not been able to do that yet.
Okay. So we could, I don't know, Wes, if you have anyone else who could present it, or we could just move to information and come back and finish the business item.
Madam Chair, I'm looking at who's there attending. I know that business item was primarily for construction agreements on bus stops and other transit purposes that are associated with the Hennepin Avenue construction, and that was the purpose. I don't have the business item right in front of me right now, but I'm not seeing. Let me look once more. I apologize.
Nope, that's all right. So we can move to the information item.
Madam Chair, this is Jim Harwood, Assistant Director, Engineering and Construction. I could run through this if that's okay.
That's fine with me if everyone's comfortable. Go for it. Thank you, Jim.
Yep. So the proposed action of this business item is to authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute a contract, which is a cooperative construction agreement with the city of Minneapolis. This is for both construction of 8 enhanced bus stops, replacing existing bus stops on the stretch of Hennepin from 12th to 3rd in downtown Minneapolis, as well as for an easement that's necessary for the stop between 10th and 11th. I believe Paul presented with street operations the city's project to the committee probably about a year ago. As they got started on some of their utility work, and we were talking about some of our bus detours at the time. Well, they are now moving in full swing with that project for the next 3 years. They are in the process of getting started with the contractor that they've awarded the project to, and we have this agreement outlines Transit's share of those construction costs, and that is $1.5312 million based on the bids received by the city, as well as I mentioned previously, 50% share of an easement that is between 10th and 11th for our southbound bus stop there. This does consolidate several of the bus stops that were previously on the corridor, fewer bus stops, enhanced bus stops, and then set up for future BRT as well. So the city competitively bid the project, received 3 bids, and there was a DBE goal of 16.8% on that, and the low bid contractor did meet that goal. We do have funding identified in the CIP for this work, local capital funding, and there's no known opposition. So with that, I would stand to take any questions.
Thank you so much. Questions from council members? Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you. So I'm looking through my notes and I did not see the name of the contractor. Am I missing something?
I do not see that in the business item, and I unfortunately have not prepared with that contractor's name currently. That is something we could absolutely follow up, who was awarded that contract by the city of Minneapolis.
Okay, thank you. If I may.
Yep, go ahead.
My next question is, I know at one point we had a contractor for our real-time signs, and we no longer have access to that original contractor. Is this new contractor going to be handling this project's real-time signs as well as other signs that need to be replaced?
I did just, Madam Chair and Council Member, I did just receive a message from that the contractor is Tyzak, first of all, who was awarded. So that is the name of the contractor. The city has awarded the low bid project to here. In terms of the real-time signs, they will be done through a different contract. We will handle some of that transit-owned technology through a separate later procured contract. As mentioned, this is a 3-year construction contract before Hennepin will be back open in full to the city, and we are timing some of those technology contracts associated with that overall city's contract. So that'll be a future procurement the transit will lead and implement.
Thank you. Any additional questions from council members? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2020-129.
Moved, Atlas Engebretson.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second, Chambliss.
Very good. Second by Chambliss. Is there any other discussion? If not, Jenna, can you call the roll, please?
Atlas Engebretson.
Aye.
Chambliss.
Aye.
Cummings.
Aye.
Ferguson.
Aye.
Fredson. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Sterner.
Aye.
Zarin. Barber.
Aye. With that, the motion carries. Thank you very much, Jim, for stepping up and doing that for us. Appreciate it. So that's the end of our business agenda. And next step is deciding what can go and on consent to the full council. I would say that all three of these could go on consent to the full council. I don't hear disagreement. All right, sounds good. All right, so we're on to information. So our information item tonight is travel behavior inventory data highlights. We have Jonathan Ehrlich and Ashley Asmus. I think Ashley's presenting, if I recall.
Hello, yes, this is Ashley Asmus, and I'll be presenting the travel behavior inventory survey data today. It's sort of a longish presentation. I have 22 slides to show you today, but I think we have time to discuss along the way, so please just stop me if anything is confusing or needs clarification. Some of the slides are pretty information rich, and we want to make sure that people have time to digest the information on them. And in addition, we know from previous meetings with you all that you're really interested in the demographic representativeness of the survey, and especially with regards to race. And we have some slides at the end where we're going to be talking about that specifically. And we want to make sure that we leave time to discuss that as well, so that if you have questions about demographic representativeness, we'll address those as well. Greg, you can go ahead and go to the first slide there. Okay, so as you probably know, the travel behavior inventory is sort of a set of surveys that are done at the household level. They're done on transit users, and there are other special surveys that are done on airport travelers and the like, to get a whole picture of the way people travel in the region. And that data gets fed into the transportation policy plan. It gets fed to our forecast models of how travel will change into the future. But it's such a rich data set. It is so awesome that we want to use it for its own right and do some really great analyses, statistical analyses and explorations to understand more about the way people get around in the region. Okay, next slide. So there are a variety of factors that determine how and how much we all travel. And these are all factors that we want to collect data on in this survey. Information about households, how many people are there, what household structure there is, whether people have kids or not, their income and where they live, whether or not people work and how many jobs they have, if they go to school and where they go to school, and information about people and where they live and how they use the area. You can go to the next slide, Greg. And altogether in this survey, we sampled 7,870 households who started their first day of travel between October 2018 and October 2019. The map on the left, it's a map of the region. You can see it in the, well, just barely lighter gray in the middle. And the blue dots are all households that were sampled in the survey. You see some blue dots outside of the metro area. We also are interested in how people in the surrounding areas travel and use the roadways in the metro. And so these folks are sampled as well. New with this survey, we had a substantial majority responding using a smartphone app. And these folks were asked to complete the survey over the course of multiple days, up to 7 days. And the average number of days that those folks did was about 6, which is great. So 6 out of 7 days, it means that we captured some weekend travel behavior that we've never seen before in previous surveys. So that is really exciting. Of course, there are a lot of households that might not have smartphones, might not feel comfortable downloading an app onto their phone, or for whatever reason. We wanted to make sure that those folks had an opportunity to respond to the survey as well. And 2,504 people completed the survey without a smartphone and just did a one-day diary survey, which is similar to previous travel behavior household surveys. The sample is, on the whole, across the whole sampling survey area, is 58% urban and 23% rural, 23% renters, 75% homeowners. We have just so much information about how the composition of households in the survey. 7% had no car at all. And in total, 16,000 people responded to the survey. Okay, great. Go ahead and go to the next slide. This is where it gets fun. Okay, so people took across the entire survey 350,000 individual trips. And here's a map of where everyone went. The folks who used the smartphone survey, the people who responded on the online diary, and wow, people went everywhere. They mostly went within the metro, but people went on exciting trips. Someone took their smartphone and got cell phone service the whole time they were hiking up Machu Picchu. So we can see their travel up Machu Picchu, which is really cool. And there's just a lot of really rich information that people told us about why they were traveling that really reveals the kind, the like richness of life in the metro in the before times, I guess. But there were three trips for people who were going to play bingo, one trip where someone was going to play organ at a wedding, and even one very mysterious errand to the Cayman Islands that somebody reported. That seems very exciting. This in addition to, of course, like all the regular travel that happens every day that we're so interested in capturing and measuring for the whole area. Okay, great, go ahead. So when we think about at the metro level, why we travel, just trying to condense all of those various reasons into broad categories. For this year's survey, we're seeing that about 40% of travel is for what we're calling maintenance. Trips that you take to maintain your home, to support your family, to support your life. So trips for healthcare, to the doctor, to the pharmacy, trips to get groceries and other errands, and trips to pick up or drop off family members from daycare or adult daycare. We see about 29% of travel is for social and recreational purposes, like going to get coffee with friends, 24% of travel for work, and about 5% for school. We think that number is actually a little low, and we'd like to do some more digging on it to see if that number is more comparable to previous year surveys. Okay, this slide is showing you, so travel behavior varies according to each of those different purposes. The horizontal axis in each of these miniature figures is showing you the hour of the day that someone left. So 12 is noon and 16 is 4 p.m. And then the y-axis, the height of the bar, tells you how many trips were taken for that purpose at that time in the metro. And you can see that the trip timing depends on the traveler and the purpose. That maintenance travel kind of peaks later in the day when people are getting off of work, right? Like if they're stopping off in the afternoon or evening to pick up something, but also early in the day. Social and recreational travel peaks later in the evening, as we might expect. School travel is really bimodal, so we see all the kids going to school at school times, which is good to see. This also includes some trips to college, so there's a little bit of scatter around there. And work travel is also bimodal with some peaks around peak commute times.
Ashley, before you go on to the next slide, I believe Councilmember Ellis Ingebrigtsen had a question.
Oh, sure. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Ashley. Thanks, Chair. One thing I think that is really important, I reviewed the slides ahead of time and I kind of am seeing this, and this is one slide that pops out to me, but there's others that kind of reinforce, I'm using air quotes, hopefully you can see them, a normal travel. And I think that it's really important for us to take this opportunity that we're all being given to really get out of the practice of looking at our data in the context of normal and ignoring other ways of getting around, whether it's, so the things that I'm thinking of right now is, for example, your income has a lot to do with your travel behavior, of course. If you are transit dependent, your behavior is going to be very different. And oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes that can come with income. But I just think that that's something that this slide in particular, that we just really have to be cautious about our own language when it comes to talking about when people get off work at 5 o'clock. Because a huge portion of our transit users are not getting off work at 5 o'clock. They may be going to their second job at 5 o'clock, or they may be just starting work at 5 o'clock, and they count. they're normal, they matter. And I want to make sure that we are seeing a reduction in disparities of how we track information and our thinking and pedagogy around the way and what information we collect and present. So not as much of a question as just kind of a call to thought on that.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Member Alice Ingebretson. I think that is a really great point. And actually, as soon as I said a typical commute, I realized that I was kind of normalizing this like picture of a commuter as a 9-to-5 person, you know, like punching the clock at a salaried job. We've had some conversations with folks at Metro Transit trying to like reimagine what we think of as a typical commute. Actually, if you go to the next slide, maybe that touches on it a bit. Okay, so is that okay if I just continue on with this slide here? And then Member Alice Ingebretson, if you would like to chime in later with additional thoughts, if you feel like I've missed the point, please do so, that'd be great. Okay, so this is showing you just one very particular reason that people travel. They go from their home to work or from their work to home. And we wanted to disaggregate that a bit to think a little bit harder about like travel patterns according to different demographic data. And here we're using income. So the x-axis is the same, the horizontal axis is the same as the previous slide. We've got hour of departure where 12 is noon and 20 is 8 p.m. And then we've got the percentage of commutes that leave at that time. In gray, you've got a line for households, commutes by people that live in households that make under $50,000 a year. And in blue, you see over $50,000 a year. And what I want to draw your attention to is the disparity between these two income levels in the middle and the end of the day. So if we think that commutes happen at 9 and 5 p.m., or I guess 8 and 4 p.m. really, then we're missing this essential travel that happens in the middle of the day by people doing shift work, by people working 3 to 11, 1 to 9, right? And we're missing that peak later in the day as well. And so this kind of data can be informative in terms of planning transit service and in terms of just making our transportation services work equitably for people who work all sorts of jobs, not just the 9-to-5 salary jobs. Let's go to the next slide. Thanks, Greg. Okay. So thinking about income a little bit more, when I started this job, I was really interested in commute times and what effect income had on commute times. I didn't realize that in the census data and in this data, we actually see an increase in the amount of time it takes to get to work with your income level. So, sorry, the horizontal axis in this figure is income. So on the right, households that make more money, and on the left, households that make less. And the vertical axis is how long it takes to get from home to work or vice versa in minutes. The black line is showing you commute times for all modes, blue for driving, and red for transit. So the first thing that you probably notice is that that red line is a lot higher than that black and blue line. And what we're seeing is that across all income levels, transit commute time is about 56% longer than for driving. But we also see households that make more money willing to make longer commute times on transit. So this is something that we want to explore a little bit more in depth. And we also have a really rich transit survey data set that we can use to look at this a little bit more. Let's go to the next slide. Sorry, I keep forgetting I can't advance the slides here. Okay. So this is, so commuting is just one specific kind of travel, but when we think about essential travel, there's all sorts of stuff that people do that needs to support their households and lives. And one essential trip that's top of the mind for most of us right now is grocery store shopping. And so I wanted to look at travel to and from the grocery store. And here I've broken it down by transportation mode. We've got driving, transit, walking, and bicycle trips. And the vertical axis is about how long it takes to get to the grocery store by those modes from your house. If you drive, you walk, or you ride your bicycle, you're spending about 12 minutes to get there. If you take transit, the median trip duration is about 25 minutes. So That's a lot longer. That's a lot of time lost. If you travel to and from, that's about a half an hour. And then when we break down that data a little bit more, we're seeing that of those who are taking this slower mode, this transit mode to the grocery store, in our survey, 18% of them are African American, compared to 3% of those who drove, 9% of those who walked, and 3% of those who biked. So the slower transit time is having a disproportionate impact on people as well. And just actually, could you go back, Greg? Thanks, I appreciate it. So, and out of curiosity, you know, we were wondering how much grocery shopping people did in the time before coronavirus, just as like an information item. And what we're seeing is that in a 7-day period, people are going to the grocery store about 4 times per week per person, and for a whole household, about 7 times per week per person, which is a lot of grocery shopping. And I think we're doing a lot less right now. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, so I mentioned that we had that 7-day survey, and we're just starting to scratch the surface of what weekend travel looks like and how that differs according to, or how that differs from weekday travel. So the bar chart on your right is showing the percentage of trips that fall into those broad categories that I've been talking about. You'll see that school and work trips are still happening on the weekends, of course, but there's a lot more social and recreational travel that happens, and about the same amount of maintenance travel. So the same amount of like shopping and errands, we're doing that as well. Okay, let's go to the next one. And in addition to tracking, you know, when people take trips and where they go, we're also tracking when people don't travel. There's like a really great anecdote about this woman who called in for a survey that she was doing for her mom, and or she was doing it with her elderly mother. And she said, "My mom doesn't travel at all. Like, why do you want her to complete this survey, right? You know, she's in the nursing home. She doesn't leave." And it's like, well, that is really important to know about. Like, people not traveling. What are the barriers to travel? That's important to know about as well. And on a typical weekday in the metro, 17% of people don't travel. 36% of those are doing housework with a roughly even gender split. 3% were taking care of children, more women than men. 16% did so because of weather, with the vast majority of those happening in January and February of 2019, which you might remember as a pretty bad winter. 10% were working remotely that day, and 6% lacked transportation. We want to look into those. All right, Greg. Okay. So another demographic variable that's key to understanding how people travel is age. And I broke down the percent of people, or the percent of trips that people are taking for each mode, for each age group in the survey. The x-axis in each of these, or the horizontal axis in each of these figures, is age. And the vertical axis is the percent of trips that someone in that age category was taking over the course of the survey. So driving tends to increase with age, walking tends to decrease. Transit use is a lot higher among 18 to 24-year-olds, but you know, it tends to peak a little bit later. And biking travel declines. And then smartphone ride-hailing service, we caught only a few of these trips, but we're seeing pretty stark peak around the 18 to 24-year-old demographic. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Thanks, Greg. We also want to understand how gender affects the way people travel. It affects so many other aspects of life. And what we're seeing in the data is that relative to men of the same age, women under 65 take a lot more trips to serve their family, do errands for others, and fewer trips for work. So work isn't shown in this particular slide, but that's kind of the trade-off that we're seeing. So the vertical axis in each of these is the number of trips someone is taking per day, broken down by age group, 18 to 34, 35 to 64, and 65 and over. You can see the disparity in the central panel, where women under 65 are doing a lot more errands for others. And interestingly, that seems to flip for senior citizens. All right, let's go on over to the next slide. Thanks, Greg. In this figure, I'm showing you the same kind of information, but for people with and without disabilities. So the same age categories on the horizontal axis and the number of trips a person takes per day on the vertical axis. So on average, people take about 4 trips per day in the metro. But if you have a physical disability that affects your travel outside the home, then you take about 1 less trip per day. And when we look at this by the type of travel that people are doing, which is on the next slide, we see that disability-related disparities in travel are greatest for work and for social travel, and greatest for older adults relative to younger adults. So each of these panels is broken down for the type of travel, with maintenance on the left, social and recreational travel in the middle, and work travel on the right. We've been doing some analyses of these data. We want to understand, whether having a job or how you get around, whether it's by car or transit, all of these things interact with each other to affect the way people can get around in the area. And we want to understand these factors together using some statistical analysis. We want to do a similar thing for race and ethnicity data. So again, I'm showing you trips per day on the vertical axis. This is like our best barometer that we have across all these groups, and broken down by race. So we've got white alone, African American or Black alone, Asian alone, and Hispanic or Latinx in the light blue. And considering the panel on the left, this is for all trips. It looks like there's less travel by non-white groups, by people of color, relative to white people in the metro area. But the disparities are greatest for social and recreational travel and for maintenance travel. It looks like there might be a different story happening for work. And maybe this is people, a demographic thing like age, or it could be that people are working more jobs. These are all things that we want to take into account with a deeper statistical analysis. Okay, and let's go on to the next slide. In addition to all this data on people, we've got information on what people are driving around. So this whole data set of vehicles. Oh, I see a hand.
Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen.
Thanks, Chair. So if you go back, Greg, 1 slide, one thing that I think I really want to see us do differently is when we present studies or pull data, 2 things. 1, I want to make sure that we're doing our best to be representative of the population that we serve. And 2, if we are not, that we disclose that. People make decisions based on this information. And we heard last time that African Americans and other ethnic groups were underrepresented. I took a look, all of the ethnic groups were underrepresented other than white. And white was overrepresented fairly significantly. So when we're making these decisions, it's so important to understand that this information is not providing us with an accurate understanding, and that we don't make statements that are as if they are accurate, if that makes sense. It may be the best that we know. It may be, here's giving people the information so that they know the degree to which this information is not representative and why that is. But it's just so important for us as decision makers and policy makers at our committee and at the council level to make sure we're paying attention to issues like this, that we are doing what we need to do to make sure that the data we get in gives us information so that we can make decisions from a place of strength. And it's so important that as staff, when we have this information and it's not representative, that we don't present it to our local communities and other decision makers as if it is. And I think that we can have a conversation. I don't think it's maybe the conversation for today, but later, about the challenges that were articulated at our last transportation meeting around getting representative data. But right now, real time, we are seeing what it costs us to continue to ignore representation. And I just really need this to shift in our practices here at the council.
Madam Chair and Member Ingebretson, yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think one thing we can do better with a deeper statistical analysis of this data is to communicate some of the uncertainty around these findings. I mean, what I'm showing you here are some bars, without any communication of the uncertainty around the estimates. So these are trends and not and haven't been validated with statistical analysis that would take into account other demographic factors. And that's absolutely something that we're going to be doing in the future. I see Jonathan popped on. Maybe I'll let him also speak. Yeah.
Did you have a comment?
I don't have any comment. I don't have any other comments at this point.
Okay. I saw Councilmember Chambliss also had her hand up.
No comments at this point.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So Greg, go ahead and we'll look at the vehicle data. Okay. So this is showing you a distribution of the age of cars in the metro area. We have a lot of different cars in the area, and we collected information on whether or not they had min-pass toll transponders, how much people pay for parking when they park their cars. And all of this information is going to provide a really cool, detailed portrait of the kind of burden, I think, also like the cost burden that having a car has on people. We really want to understand like what's the whole picture here, like of having a car. And go ahead and go to the next slide. Touches on that a little bit more. So what we see is that household income is strongly positively correlated with the age of vehicles in the household. So as you make more money, the newer your car. This shouldn't be news to anyone who has seen their income change over the course of their life, but definitely has implications for how much maintenance you have to do on your car, how reliable your transportation is. And this is something that we would like to understand more. Okay, and let's go to the last slides, which are going to directly address, I think, Alice Ingebretson and Member Chambliss's comments. We have some planned research topics around comparing this data to previous years, which is going to be a little bit more complex given the differences in the survey design, and our new smartphone survey catches a greater amount of travel of people. We just want to make sure that we're doing it correctly. And we want to look at regional disparities by race, income, gender, and ability status, and identify some opportunities for more sustainable mode choices, like where are people taking really short driving trips? Where can we help people make a more sustainable mode choice? And looking at the vehicle emissions, gas efficiency, and age data from the perspective of how sensitive households are to changes in gas prices, to the reliability of transportation. And we have a new survey that we're rolling out, a follow-up survey from people in this survey to look at the impacts of COVID-19 on travel. Okay, and let's go to the last two slides. So this is showing you the breakdown of survey respondents by race and ethnicity, the ethnicity being Hispanic, Latinx, or non-Hispanic. And let's see. As Member Ingebretson mentioned, our survey is slightly overrepresentative of whites and underrepresenting people of color. So 89%, 90% of people in our survey across, this is the whole sampling area, not just the metro area, were white, and compared to 80% that we would have expected from the ACS or census survey. For Black or African Americans, 375 people responded that they were Black or African American alone. That's 2.5% of our sample, but we would have expected 7.8% based on ACS or census data. Similarly, for Asian alone, 484 people responded that they were Asian. That's 3.3% of our survey, 6.2% we would have expected with the ACS. For ethnicity, we're also seeing an underrepresentation of Hispanic and Latinx folks. So we had 377 people respond that they were Hispanic or Latinx. It's 2.5% of our survey sample and 6% we would have expected with the census. And the last slide is showing you a breakdown of the geographic representativeness of the sample. which I think did a little bit better. So we're seeing that urban populations were sampled at 58.5% in the survey sample compared to what we would have expected of 61.4. Rural 7.2 compared to 7.9, and rural ring areas 15.6 compared to 16.7. Okay, with that, I would be very happy to take your questions. Jonathan is also here to answer questions about survey design, and we would really like to get some good feedback going on this. Thank you.
All right, questions or comments from council members? So maybe could you talk a little bit about how you reach out to, how do you decide where things are going to get the surveys, and how have we been approaching that? Jonathan?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Madam Chair, thank you. I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the issues with representativeness of the sample. It's in our survey design, increasing and maintaining a high level of representativeness across geographies, incomes, and races was a priority, and continues to be a priority, and improving it in the next wave is a very high priority for us. In the first wave of this survey, the survey included a subcontract with a contractor specifically to do outreach. That consultant was and continues to be New Publica out of Minneapolis, and the specific outreach activities that were done included translating the survey into 5 languages, targeted outreach, including social media targeted to specific cultural groups, multicultural paid media in a variety of print, digital, and radio publications, partnerships with community-based organizations, and partnerships with stakeholders and ambassadors to promote taking the survey, as well as newsletters and electronic releases targeting particular areas. Over the course of the survey, it became clear that we were having issues with representativeness, particularly with non-white and low-income populations, which was not unexpected, but it was larger than we were hoping it was going to be. And so we implemented a number of sample design experiments with varying levels of success, including varying the financial incentives that we gave to low-income and non-white households after recruit, included targeted oversampling for what we termed difficult to reach households based on what we were seeing earlier in the survey. We were seeing, tried to reach households multiple times that weren't responding to the survey, including making additional contact and assigning travel dates multiple times for difficult to reach demographic groups, as well as in select block groups with high concentrations of low participation. Did specific door-to-door outreach for people who received the survey invite, did targeted door-to-door outreach. Those were experiments we did with varying levels of success. We're currently evaluating to see whether we should be applying those more broadly in wave 2, as well as we have challenged both our prime consultant and our outreach sub-consultant to develop with us more techniques for increasing representativeness of the survey. It's something that is a high priority for wave 2, and something that we are very concerned with. Then that being said, aggregate results that we're showing are either broken out by race, or they are all weighted. Race is included as a weighting variable in aggregate demographic statistics. So when we are as an example, when we're showing any particular slide that's not broken up by race, The data for underrepresented groups is weighted to increase their representativeness in the survey. So we're not just taking and weighting we're not just treating every survey respondent equally. We're looking at them across a number of axes, including race, but also including age, income, household composition, geography, to make sure that the survey is representative as it's possible for it to be. So I take all of the concerns that have been expressed very, very seriously. And again, it's a very high priority, both to make sure that we're communicating uncertainty and representativeness as well as we possibly can, as well as to continue to improve representativeness of surveys of this type as much as we can.
I saw Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen had her hand up.
Thanks, Chair. So I want to just share that I appreciate the team's work, and I know that what we're doing is a journey to improvement and something that we all have to do, all institutions need to do. I'd like to offer two things. One, New Publica is an organization that is really skilled at working in the Latinx community, and the Latinx community is not underrepresented based on the information provided on slide 21. That's not a surprise when you think about that. So I'd like you to consider, how do you have vendors who are prepared to be successful with all the communities we need to work with? I'm sure that what was shared is that they could reach all of them, but that's just not what's borne out in the outcomes of the work. And so that's one thing that I think it's great, continue to work with them, but clearly we need to work with other vendors who are and have, one of the things that's really important, true, authentic ties to the various communities that you want to connect with. And using a more culturally competent approach is something that I know that they can do within their cultural context, but clearly that didn't happen. And so I think that that's one thing to maybe take a note on. That's their strength. They were successful in it. So how do we get other vendors engaged who it's their strength to work with other communities and include them at the same level so that we have that type of success? So that's one thing that I'd like to just throw out there as an idea. The other thing I'd like to just share is that I think it's really really good, all the efforts we went through, but sometimes by making those different choices, we can go through a lot less effort. So you illustrated a desire to go above and beyond and try and just address that lack of information. But I think that by changing the practice, you might be able to have a different level of success and just how important that really is.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Madam Chair, I really appreciate the last comment. And I don't have a complete answer for it now, but one of the things that we're exploring in terms of overall survey methods is one of the bases of surveys like this has always been what's called probability sampling, which means that to the best of our extent, everybody in the region has an equal likelihood or a predetermined likelihood of receiving a survey that we can control. In surveys like this around the country, especially in the past 15, 20 years, since the decline in the ability to do phone surveying in a random way, with the growth of cell phones, that's something that has become much harder. And we've seen a lot of regions move to what's called non-probability or convenience sampling, where we're not just trying to encourage people to fill out a survey when it comes, which they have a relatively low likelihood of receiving, but to do very targeted outreach with the survey to try to motivate specific groups of people to actually take the survey. So, for example, in the Phoenix metro area, there's work being done with school districts, providing incentives to schools in targeted areas to have everybody in the school district, every household associated with the school district fill out and participate in the survey process. That presents other complications, which we have to decide whether they're worth it in terms of analyzing the survey, in terms of its usefulness for modeling, it's something that, and without getting too far deep in the weeds right now, it's something that we're starting to think about and consider whether that would be appropriate in the Twin Cities as well. But certainly changing our approach and changing some of our methods and some of our assumptions is something that we are really seriously thinking about, and we really appreciate both those comments and the challenge to our thinking of what's the most appropriate way to be approaching data collection and what are the most important values that we need to be considering when we're doing it and when we're planning it.
Okay. Additional questions from council members? All right, so Councilmember Fedson has been on but his audio isn't working. So he has a question. I'm going to attempt to ask his question. So basically he's talking about when we had the slides where it was around slide 8, where income affects when people commute. And so he's kind of asking that if there's a possibility that people with lower incomes are traveling at different times, like off-peak when fares are lower because it's cheaper. And do you have any data along those lines to show that there's any connection between travel times and lower fares from that perspective?
Yeah, Madam Chair. Wow, that's a great question. That's kind of a chicken and an egg, isn't it? I don't know if we would be able to determine the difference between cause and effect there. But it's something we could look at in more detail with our transit survey also. Look at fare price. I don't know, Jonathan, do you have any thoughts there? I might bring this one over to you.
Madam Chair, that's exactly the case, and we really want to understand when people are traveling and when people are traveling when people of different incomes are traveling for commutes, because it also affects their experience at the level of service of transportation system. So one axis that you correctly pointed out is fares. The other is level of transit service. And if you're commuting to your job that starts at 11 o'clock in the morning as opposed to 8 o'clock in the morning, you have less transit service probably. And your experience of the transit system is of longer wait times, possibly slower times, fewer potential trips. On the other hand, if you're commuting at 11 o'clock in the morning, the degree to which you care about congestion is probably a lot less if you're traveling by car, because there isn't much congestion throughout most of the system at 11 o'clock in the morning. And it may be that the demographics of people who care a lot about peak hour congestion are tied to income or tied to race in ways that are worth knowing. We haven't looked closely enough at the data and statistically rigorously enough at the data to be able to say anything very specifically, but those are really fascinating questions that we really want to dig into.
All right, additional questions from council members? And he said I did ask the right question, so that was passed my test for the today. Anybody else have questions or comments? Okay, then I think we are good. Thank you, Ashley and Jonathan. Very appreciate it very much. Just want to note for the record that Chris, Councilmember Fedson, has been on the line the entire time. We just can't hear him. And so he wanted to note that he did vote in favor of all of our actions tonight. So we just want to make sure that's recorded somewhere. And with that, I don't think there's anything else unless anyone has anything. All right, if not, then we are adjourned. Thank you all. Have a great night.